Easter story. The plot against Jesus. When Jesus had finished teaching all these things, he said to his disciples, "In 2 days, as you know, it will be the Passover festival, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Then the chief priests and the elders met together in the palace of Caiphas, the high priest, and made plans to arrest Jesus secretly and put him to death. "We must not do it during the festival," they said, "or the people will riot." Jesus is anointed at Bethany. Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon, a man who had suffered from dreaded skin disease. While Jesus was eating, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar filled with an expensive perfume, which she poured on his head. The disciples saw this and became angry. "Why all this was waste?" they asked. "This perfume could have been sold for a large amount and the money given to the poor." Jesus knew what they were saying, so he said to them, "Why are you bothering the woman? It is a fine and beautiful thing that she has done for me. You will always have poor people with you, but you will not always have me. What she did was to pour his perfume on my body to get me ready for burial. Now I assure you that wherever this gospel is preached all over the world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." Judas agrees to betray Jesus. Then one of the 12 disciples, the one named Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, "What will you give me if I betray Jesus to you?" They counted out 30 silver coins and gave them to him. From then on, Judas was looking for a good chance to hand Jesus over to them. Jesus eats the Passover meal with his disciples. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked him, "Where do you want us to get the Passover meal ready for you?" "Go to a certain man in the city," he said to them, "and then tell him, 'The teacher says, my hour has come. My disciples and I will celebrate the Passover at your house.'" The disciples did as Jesus had told them and prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, Jesus and the 12 disciples sat down to eat. During the meal, Jesus said, "I tell you, one of you will betray me." The disciples were very upset and began to ask him, one after the other, "Surely, Lord, you don't mean me." Jesus answered, "One who dips his bread in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man will die as the scriptures say he will, but now terrible for that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would have been better for the man if he had never been born." Judas the traitor spoke up. "Surely, teacher, you don't mean me," he asked. Jesus answered, "So you say." The Lord's Supper. While they were eating, Jesus took a piece of bread, gave a prayer of thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples. "Take and eat," he said. "This is my body." Then he took a cup, gave thanks to God, and gave it to them. "Drink it, all of you," he said. "This is my blood, which seals God's covenant. My blood poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink this wine until the day I drink the new wine with you in my Father's kingdom." Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. Jesus predicts Peter's denial. Then Jesus said to them, "This very night, all of you will run away and leave me. For the scripture says, God will kill the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised to life, I will go to Galilee ahead of you." Peter spoke up and said to Jesus, "I will never leave you, even though all the rest do." Jesus said to Peter, "I tell you that before the cock crows tonight, you will say 3 times that you do not know me." Peter answered, "I will never say that, even if I have to die with you." And all the other disciples said the same thing. Jesus prays in Gethsemane. Then Jesus went with the disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee. Grief and anguish came over him, and he said to them, "The sorrow in my heart is so great that it almost crushed me. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went a little further on, threw himself face downwards on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, take this cup of suffering from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he returned to the 3 disciples and found them asleep. And he said to Peter, "How is it that you 3 were not able to keep watch with me even for 1 hour? Keep watch and pray that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Once more, Jesus went away and prayed, "My Father, if this cup of suffering cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done." He returned once more and found the disciples asleep. They could not keep their eyes open. Again, Jesus left them, went away and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same once. Then he returned to the disciples and said, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be handed over to the power of sinners. Get up, let us go. Look, here is the man who is betraying me." The arrest of Jesus. Jesus was still speaking when Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs and set by the chief priests and the elders. The traitor had given the crowd a signal, "The man I kiss is the one you want, arrest him." Judas went straight to Jesus and said, "Peace be with you, teacher," and kissed him. Jesus answered, "Be quick about it, Fred." Then they came up, arrested Jesus, and held him tight. One of those who were with Jesus drew his sword and struck at the high priest's slave, cutting off his ear. "Put your sword back in its place. Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him. "All who take the sword will die by the sword. Don't you know that I could call on my Father for help, and at once he would send me more than 12 armies of angels? But in that case, how could the scriptures come true which say that this is what must happen?" Then Jesus spoke to the crowd. "Did you have to come with swords and clubs to capture me as though I were an outlaw? Every day I sat down and taught in the temple, and you did not arrest me. But all this has happened in order to make what the prophets wrote in the scriptures come true." Then all the disciples left him and ran away. Jesus before the council. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to the house of Caiphas, the highest priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had gathered together. Peter followed from a distance. As far as the courtyard of the high priest's house, he went in the courtyard and sat down with the guards to see how it would all come out. The chief priests and the world council tried to find some false evidence against Jesus to put him to death, but they could not find any, even though many people came forward and told lies about him. Finally, two men stepped up and said, "This man said, I am able to tear down God's temple and 3 days later build it up." The high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Have you no answer to give to this accusation against you?" But Jesus kept quiet. Again, the high priest spoke to him, "In the name of the living God, I now put you on the oath. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus answered him, "So you say, but I tell all of you, from the time you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right of the Almighty and coming on the clouds of heaven." At this, the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Blasphemy! We don't need any more witnesses. You have just heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered, "He is guilty and must die." Then they spat in his face and beat him, and those who slapped him said, "Prophesy for us, prophesy for us, Messiah, guess who hit you?" Peter denies Jesus. Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard when one of the high priest's servants' women came to him and said, "You too were with Jesus of Galilee." But he denied it in front of them all. "I don't know what you are talking about," he said, and went on out to the entrance of the courtyard. Another servant woman saw him and said to the men there, "He was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again Peter denied it and answered, "I swear that I don't know that man." After a little while, the men standing there came to Peter. "Of course you are one of them," they said. "After all, the way you speak gives you away." Then Peter said, "I swear that I am telling the truth. May God punish me if I am not. I do not know that man." Just then a cock crowed, and Peter remembered what Jesus had told him. "Before the cock crows, you will say 3 times that you do not know me." He went out and wept bitterly. Jesus is taken to Pilate. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders made their plans against Jesus to put him to death. They put him in chains, led him off, and handed him over to Pilate, the Roman governor. The death of Judas. When Judas the traitor learned that Jesus had been condemned, he repented and took back the 30 silver coins to the chief priests and the elders. "I have sinned by betraying an innocent man to death," he said. "What do we care about that?" They answered. "That is your business." Judas threw the coins down in the temple and left. Then he went off and hanged himself. The chief priests picked up the coins and said, "This is blood money, and it is against our law to put in the temple treasury." After reaching an agreement about it, they used the money to buy potter's field as a cemetery for foreigners. That is why the field is called Field of Blood to this very day. Then what the prophet Jeremiah had said came true. They took the 30 silver coins, the amount the people of Israel had agreed to pay for him, and used the money to buy the potter's field as the Lord had commanded me. Pilate questions Jesus. Jesus stood before the Roman governor, who questioned him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked. "So you say," answered Jesus, but he said nothing in response to the accusations to the chief priests and elders. So Pilate said to him, "Don't you hear all these things they accuse you of?" But Jesus refused to answer a single word, with the result that the governor was greatly surprised. Jesus is sentenced to death. At every Passover festival, the Roman governor was in the habit of setting free any one prisoner the crowd asked for. At that time, there was a well-known prisoner named Jesus Barabbas. So when the crowd gathered, Pilate asked them, Which one do you want me to set free for you? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus called the Messiah? He knew very well that the Jews authorities had handed Jesus over to him because they were jealous. While Pilate was sitting in the judgment hall, his wife sent him a message. Have nothing to do with that innocent man, because in a dream last night I suffered much on account of him. The chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask Pilate to set Barabbas free and have Jesus put to death. Pilate asked the crowd, "Which one of these two do you want me to set free for you?" "Barabbas," they answered. "What then shall I do with Jesus called the Messiah?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they all answered. But Pilate asked, "What crime has he committed?" Then they started shouting at the top of their voices, "Crucify him." When Pilate saw that it was no use to go on, but that a riot might break out, he took some water, washed his hands in front of the crowd and said, "I am not responsible for the death of this man. This is your doing." The whole crowd answered me, "Let the responsibility for his death fall on us and our children." Then Pilate set Barabbas free for them, and after he had Jesus whipped, he handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers mocked Jesus. Then Pilate's soldiers took him to the governor's palace, and the whole company gathered around him. They stripped off his clothes and put a scarlet robe on him. Then they made a crown out of thorny branches and placed it on his head, and put a stick in his right hand. Then they knelt before him and mocked him. "Long live the King of the Jews," they said. They spat on him and took the stick and hit him over the head. When they had finished mocking him, they took the robe and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. Jesus is crucified. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and the soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine mixed with a bitter substance, but after tasting it, he would not drink it. They crucified him, then divided his clothes among them by throwing dice. After that, they sat there and watched him. Above his head, they put the written notice of the accusation against him. "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then they crucified two bandits with Jesus, one on his right and the other on his left. People passing by shook their hands and hurled insults at Jesus. "You are going to tear down the temple and build it up again in 3 days. Save yourself. If you are God's son, come on down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders jeered at him. He saved others, but he cannot save himself. Isn't he the King of Israel? If he comes down off the cross now, we will believe in him. He trusts in God and claims to be God's son. Well then, let us see if God wants to save him now. Even the bandits who had been crucified with him insulted him in the same way. The death of Jesus. At noon, the whole country was covered with darkness, which lasted for 3 hours. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud shout, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why did you abandon me?" Some of the people standing there heard him and said, "He is calling for Elijah." One of them ran up at once, took a sponge, soaked it in cheap wine, but put it on the end of a stick and tried to make him drink it. But the others said, "Wait, let us see if Elijah is coming to save him." Jesus again gave a loud cry and breathed his last. Then the curtain hanging in the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split apart, the graves broke open, and many of God's people who had died were raised to life. They left their graves, and after Jesus rose from death, they went into the holy city where many people saw them. When the army officer and the soldiers with him who were watching Jesus saw the earthquake and everything else that happened, they were terrified and said, "He really was the Son of God." There were many women there looking on from a distance who had followed Jesus from Galilee and helped him. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the wife of Zebedee. The burial of Jesus. When it was evening, a rich man from Arimathea arrived. His name was Joseph, and he also was a disciple of Jesus. He went into the presence of Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate gave orders for the body to be given to Joseph. So Joseph took it, wrapped it in a new linen sheet, and placed it in his own tomb, which he had just recently dug out of solid rock. Then he rolled a large stone across the entrance to the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there facing the tomb. The next day, which was Sabbath, the chief priests and the Pharisees met with Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember that while that liar was still alive, he said, 'I will be raised to life 3 days later.' Give orders then for this tomb to be carefully guarded until that day, so that his disciples will not be able to go and steal the body and then tell the people that he was raised from dead. This last lie would be even worse than the first one. Take a guard." Pilate told them, "Go and make the tomb as secure as you can." So they left and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and leaving the guard on watch.